Achtung, Achtung, and welcome to another episode of our Thanksgiving US podcast specials of We Have Ways. I'm James Holland, and today I'm talking to veteran Bob Persichitti, who is a veteran of the USS El Dorado. He was a radio man, served out in the Pacific during the time of the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and he had an amazing story. Anyway, he's based in Rochester in New York, so this interview was conducted over Zoom, which was pretty impressive for a 98-year-old, I've got to say. And as with all my interviews with veterans, I started by asking him about his childhood. I hope you enjoy it.
I was born in Calumet, Pennsylvania. It's a little coal mining town in southwestern Pennsylvania. My dad was a coal miner, and we moved from mine to mine whenever there was work. And so I ended up in a little community called Lemont Furnace, but I was born in April 7th, 1922. I grew up in these mining towns until 1942, joined the Navy, and was sent to Bainbridge, Maryland, and took my boot camp there. And it was a new camp that was being built, and in fact it was a mess because they had hardly anything complete but the mess hall and the barracks. And so we only stayed there about 6 weeks, I guess. Normally it was 8 weeks, but we had no drill hall, we had no swimming pools, we had nothing hardly to work on. And so they processed our IQs and whatever, and they sent me to radio school in New York City. I spent 16 weeks in New York City going to radio school. And after 16 weeks, if you were able to pass the test of 16 words a minute, you were...
And this is on Morse code, is it?
Yes, Morse code, that's right. We did Morse code and theory, and if you passed a 16 word a minute the last 2 weeks, then you were in as like an apprentice. Yeah. So You went in. They sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, which I had asked for a shore station for my first try, and. So I was fortunate enough to get into a shore station in Norfolk, Virginia. I spent a whole year in Norfolk, Virginia, and then after a year, they told me I had to go to sea. So they gave me my choices on the ships. I looked at this one, and this was like April. So I said, this ship's not going to be commissioned till August. I said, that's the one I want.
Right.
So anyway, we commissioned that USS El Dorado in New York City in August, I think it was August 25th of 1944. And so we took it on shakedown, and then we headed down the East Coast and come into a hurricane in Norfolk, Virginia, and we had to anchor there for a few days in the hurricane. And then after we left Norfolk, going through Cape Hatteras, I got seasick.
Oh, dear.
And one of the fellows said to me, after I looked over the side, he says, go down and finish your dinner. He says, you'll be all right after this. Well, I never got seasick after that. So
that's amazing.
So anyway,
Mr. Persichitti, could I just rewind a little bit?
Yes.
And just go back to when you were growing up in Pennsylvania. Yeah. I mean, did you have brothers and sisters, or was it just you?
Yeah, we were 10 of us. We were 5 brothers.
Wow.
And 5 sisters. And
are you from Italian descent? Is that when did you?
My dad came over here in 1903, and my mother came here in 1903 with her parents. My dad was 17 years older than my mother. He married her.
Goodness.
She was only 15 at the time. Today, I guess he'd be in jail.
Wow. And so where did they come from?
They came from Italy, Torino di Sangro, and
Right.
Abruzzi, and that's over.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, down in the
That's
south.
it. It's over near the Adriatic Sea.
That's right. Yeah, down in the south, I think.
Yes.
And so was Italian spoken in your home
Yeah,
when you were a kid?
they spoke the dialect at that time, and
Right.
when I listen to some of the Italians today, I don't even know what they're saying. If they're talking a dialect, I can understand some of it.
That's amazing. So Italian was spoken in your house at home, was it?
Well, my mother spoke English. My dad spoke Italian, so I was able to pick
Right.
up the dialect anyway. So if I
Right.
was around Italian people at that time, most of them spoke the dialect and they didn't speak to
Yeah.
Italian because this is those years long before the people even went to school. I guess my
Right.
dad had no
But
school.
I mean, 10 of you, that's a lot.
Pardon?
That's a big family.
Yes,
That's a big family.
yes, we were. In fact, most of them are gone now. I have two young sisters. I have one sister
Hmm.
10 years younger than I am. I'm 98, she's 88. And I have
Goodness.
another young sister that's 80. She's 15 years younger. She's 83. So,
Wow.
so we were,
Wow. And did you all get on? I mean, was it a good childhood or tough
well,
or a bit of
we
both?
didn't have anything. We had hand-me-downs most of our life.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
living in the coal mining communities. It wasn't like living in a city, where you dressed had what we had, and my mother would patch and patch and patch, and by the time it got
Sure.
down to me, or even my younger brother, it was full of patches. The clothes. So anyway, that's the way we lived and were brought up, and
Sure.
it was good.
But you were quite happy, were you? You were quite happy? It was quite a happy childhood?
Yes, we were. We because we were living in a mining town. You were pretty much all the same. Uh, Kids
Right.
were all the same. We played in the streets, uh, and even playing baseball, we played without even equipment outside of a bat and a ball, and half of us didn't even have gloves. So
I mean, I think it's amazing because today, America is such a land of plenty, isn't it?
yeah, well,
And I think it's easy to forget that in the 1920s and 1930s, it was a time of depression, and
that's right.
times were tough, and Americans didn't have all the things that we associate with America today.
We pretty much grew everything that we ate. My
Wow.
we
Right.
living in a mining town. My dad always wanted to live at the end of the row, the last row where there was a little bit of land that he could
Yeah.
have a garden.
Right.
He grew his own plants. He had a
Yeah.
hotbed. He had a hotbed. He grew his own plants. He had us digging, watering, and whatever we could do. My mother canned pretty much everything she could: beans, peas,
Right.
corn, whatever we
Yeah.
grew, and that's what we ate through the winter and all the time. But other than that, if you didn't have a garden, you went with.
You struggled.
I saw people go without food for a day or two. They just didn't have
Wow.
anything.
Yeah.
It was tough, and there was no welfare at that time.
No. And presumably all you children were expected to pitch in and help, weren't you?
Well, we did what we could. We did all of that we could when we were younger, and then the older ones grew, they went out to work, and they'd bring part of their money back home to the family to go out and buy meats and whatever groceries, potatoes or whatever. A lot of
Sure.
spaghetti. We ate a lot of spaghetti and beans and peas and corn and rice. So that's how that was our growing up.
And what about schooling?
Well, we were only compelled to go to eighth grade because
Right.
our district didn't have a high school, and the only high school we had was 6 miles away, and they didn't have buses in those days. We had to pay for our bus fare. So when I got out of eighth grade, I was only 13 years old. So I couldn't go to high school because I didn't have any money. So there was no money to pay for a bus fare. So I delivered newspapers. And so what little money I made in my newspapers, we had a fellow the first year we went to school. His daughter was graduated from 8th grade and she was going to high school, junior high. So he had this big Packard, brand new 1937 Packard, or 36 Packard, yeah. And he loaded 9 of us in that thing for $4 a month. I was able to scrape up $4 a month, and I rode with them for the year. And then the following year, I hitchhiked. We had a main highway, Route 40, at that time was a national highway, coast to coast.
Sure.
And so I'd go up, I'd walk a mile up there and hitchhike. And sometimes I got into school most of the time on time. And sometimes when I didn't get in there, they'd penalize me and make me stay over in the afternoon. So anyway, I went through 4 years, graduated from high school in 1940.
God, good for you.
There was no jobs. You couldn't get a job. You go to a place and they tell you, come back when you're 21. And so, I did what I could. I helped a man huckster cantaloupes, watermelons.
Yep. Right.
For like 6 in the morning till 9 at night for $1.50 a day. $1.50 a day.
$1.50 a day.
And so,
can you believe it?
So anyway,
I mean, that's long hours.
Pardon? Yes.
That's long hours.
He'd go out and get bologna sandwiches, and then we could eat the watermelons or cantaloupes, or whatever. So that was my bringing up. And finally, just before I went into the Navy, 1941, I said to my mother, I'm going to join the Army. She wouldn't sign for me at that time, and I'm glad in a way. I probably would have gotten home even. I joined the CCC camps. It was a government.
Oh yes.
You remember?
Yeah, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yes. So I signed up to go to Arizona because they were building the Roosevelt Canal from the Colorado River to Phoenix.
Right.
I had a cousin that was down there, so I thought, well, I'll go down there. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, they sent me to Priest River, Idaho. And this was January, and I guess when we got there must have been 3 feet of snow on the ground, and very cold. And so I spent 6 months, or not quite 6 months. After 5.5 months, you could sign over. So
what were you doing? Kind of sort of forestry and things.
We were cutting hemlocks to make room for the pines. And so my job was, after they felled the hemlocks, my job was cutting the limbs and burning them, because there was like 2 feet of snow or better on the ground. Wow. And so we'd build this fire, and by the time we got out of there at the end of the day, it would be burnt down to almost to the ground. So we did that in the wintertime. And then in the spring, we planted trees, new pine trees.
Right.
And those things had to be just planted just right. We had a tool. It had a blade about a foot on the blade and a handle. Right. And you drop that blade right into the ground, and then you work the blade until you had the roots of that tree straight. It had to be straight. Right. And then you packed it back. And we did this all day long for about planting season. And then just before I left, we worked on the roads. At that time, it was gravel road up there. Mm-hmm. And the deer, my God, I'd never see so many deer. You had to stop because of them crossing the roads. But anyway, it was a great experience for me, because when I went into the Navy, I was adapted to that life.
It must have made you quite tough, didn't it? I mean, you must have been physically fit and quite tough, really. I was
adapted to that type of life. Yeah. So when I went in the Navy, it didn't bother me at all. Like some of the other fellows, I remember seeing some of the fellows, they'd be seasick or homesick and whatever. And I wasn't that way because I'd already gone through that. So it was a little easier for me when I joined the Navy.
Right. So how did you, why the Navy? Did you get any choice in the matter?
At that time, when I joined, you had to take...
Were you drafted, first of all? You were drafted, were you?
No, I wasn't drafted. In fact,
right.
I was so close to the draft, I said to my mother, I said, I'm going to join the Navy. I said, because my draft paper's coming up pretty soon. So what happened, when I had to go to Pittsburgh to take my physical. And at that time, you had to be in pretty good physically shape. And so I passed the test. And then a recruiter brought us back to Uniontown, which was near Lima, where I lived. And when I got home, I had my draft papers.
No.
So that's how close I was to the draft, because
that's amazing.
The recruiter, when I went back, that he gave us the weekend off, and said we had to be back in Pittsburgh that afternoon, on Sunday afternoon, and he was going to pick us up. So when he came and picked us up, I said to him, I said, I have these draft papers. He says, throw them away, you're already in. So that's how close I was to the draft. So anyway, I get.
And do you think you'd have ended up in the army if you had been drafted?
Yeah, because they were taking a lot of them for Europe at that time, 42. When they started getting ready for the big one over there in Europe.
But what was it about the Navy that made you think that's the one for me?
Well, I just felt I'd be a little safer on a ship, even though it wasn't very safe around Okinawa.
No, I bet it wasn't.
But anyway, I joined the Navy and ended up in leader school in Norfolk, Virginia, and then on board the ship. And when we got aboard the ship, when we got after we got to the West Coast, after going through the Panama, the sea was very rough from Panama to San Diego, that I had a headache for 7 days. I didn't get seasick, but I got this headache for 7 days.
Right.
And finally,
but was sorry to interrupt you, but you've lived your life in Pennsylvania, then you've gone off to Idaho to work for the CCC.
Yeah.
But you've never been out of the US. I mean, had you ever seen the sea, the ocean before you joined the Navy? I don't know.
I didn't.
But you're right. So, and then suddenly you're on a boat and you're sailing to the far side of the world. I mean, did it feel like an adventure, or did you feel, crikey, I'm really a long way from home here?
Well, I don't know. Going through the Panama was something for me, and then getting over on the West Coast, which like I said, I've never been away from home outside of going to Idaho for CCC camps, and it was really an adventure for me because we went into Vallejo, California, in the dry dock because we had broken down a few times and we were getting salt water into regular water, and
this was on the El Dorado.
Pardon? This was on the El Dorado. Yeah. So when we got to the West Coast, we went into dry dock in Vallejo, which is outside of San Francisco. I had some pretty good leaves, and one day, a few guys and I went to Sacramento to this band that played up there, Tommy Dorsey. And, so when we got out after the dance, we get on the road to hitchhike back home to Vallejo from Sacramento. I think it was like about 70, 80 miles or something.
Right.
This big limousine pulls up and picks a whole bunch of us up. And who was it? Tommy Dorsey picked us up. And he was on his way to San Francisco. And so he dropped us off in Vallejo. And I said to these guys, I said, you know who that was? I said, that was Tommy Dorsey, the guy that the band that we went to. So this was another experience for me. And so then after we left Vallejo, after the ship was refinished, we went to Honolulu and we spent Christmas in Honolulu. I think we spent. I don't know if we spent Thanksgiving there or whether it was in Vallejo. I'm not sure. But I know it was Christmas and New Year's. We were in Honolulu and Pearl Harbor. I mean, we couldn't get into the harbor because of all the sunken ships, but we were able to get into the area there at the entrance of the harbor, across from Hickam Field, and so we picked up Admiral Turner,
okay,
who was he was in charge of the two operations, the Iwo Jima and Okinawa operation. And we were the command ship for the whole operation.
Yeah, could I just ask you about the El Dorado? I mean, what sort of size ship? What is a command ship? What sort of size is it?
It was like a troop, about the size of a troop ship. It was a converted Liberty ship.
Huh.
When we were in New York, they converted that from a Liberty ship to a ship of war because they doubled the armor of the whole ship.
Right.
And that's the reason why it was in New York in Brooklyn Navy Yard being refitted.
Right.
And that's why I had to wait all that time.
And did it have any defenses at all? I mean, it must have had some guns on it and things.
Oh yeah, we had 2 5-inch guns, one forward and one aft.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a lot of 40s and 20s and whatever.
Right.
And they had to use them. They had to use them at Okinawa.
And as a radio man, what was your station on the ship?
I was a radio operator.
So what part of the ship were you in?
We were about just about waterline.
Oh really?
That was where that was where our radio shack was. In fact, we had two Navajo code talkers aboard.
Oh, did you? How interesting.
Yeah, and we didn't know what they were aboard for. We couldn't get near them or say anything. They didn't speak English. I mean, they just spoke in Navajo. That was their duty. They were only supposed to talk in Navajo. 2 of them went ashore at Iwo that I remember. I don't remember in Okinawa whether we had to. I think they were the same thing because they worked the code which the Japs weren't able to break.
That's right. Yeah, amazing. And your job, presumably you worked in shifts.
Yeah, we were like 8 on, 8 off.
Were you? Okay.
And then we might be off for like 16 hours, but mostly it was 8 and 8.
And what was life like on the ship? I mean, were you comfortable? Were you well fed?
Yeah, well, you drank coffee.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys smoked cigarettes.
Right.
At those days, there were a lot of them. They smoked and drank coffee, and they kept awake at night, especially.
Sure. And were you in bunks or hammocks or what?
Yeah, we had 4-tier bunks.
Right.
In fact, I slept up in about 3rd tier because that was nice up there, cool. We'd have the air coming down out of there, even though it wasn't very good when we were in Okinawa. But anyway,
yeah,
I'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had the bunks we slept in, and we were. I don't know if we were. Our compartment was above the yeah, we were above the radio shack, I believe.
And so, is your job as a radio operator, you're receiving signals and sending signals from the command ship. Is that what you're doing? All I did was receive. Right.
And a lot of the messages weren't for us. We had a certain code that was our message. If it was for us, we would take it out and give it to one of the officers, and they would decode it.
And presumably you just got better and better at that, didn't you? I mean, if you could do 16 words a minute.
I think I ended up about 24 or 26 words a minute.
Wow, that's going so.
We just get them in characters,
Sure.
And so I was able to stay behind like 5-6 characters and keep going.
Right. Amazing.
You've heard that so often that it just just what it was.
Amazing.
So it wasn't too bad. And then when I got up to Okinawa, I went and worked with one of the officers. We used to go and pick up confidentials ashore, and I'd go with him. He always had a gun on him.
Right.
I just tagged along and picked him up.
Right.
So that was an easy job for me.
Sure. So you're crossing the Pacific. You're heading out. You're heading out to the
Well,
Pacific Theater.
after we picked up the Admiral, we headed out to Guam.
Right.
And we stopped at Eniwetok. We refueled in Eniwetok.
And do you know roughly when that was? Sorry to keep interrupting, but do you know when that was roughly?
Around January 45.
Right.
And then we went on a mock invasion over to Saipan.
Right.
Before we went to Iwo.
Yeah.
And then we headed up to Iwo on, I believe it was February. The day we landed in Iwo, I think, was 19th.
Yeah. I think it was too, off the top of my head.
Anyway, we headed up there a few days before that. And when we got there, they bombed that island for 3 days, 24 hours. And if you would have seen the smoke that come off of that island, you couldn't see the island.
Right. Because it's tiny, isn't it?
You would think there would be nothing alive on that island.
No.
They didn't realize that they had all these bunkers in there.
Right.
I imagine they felt that they had the bunkers, but they didn't realize they had the ones that they had there.
Sure. So, Mr. Persichitti, would you when you weren't down in your radio station, would you come up on deck and watch and things?
Oh yeah, I saw him raise that flag that morning.
Did you?
Twice.
Wow.
I was on deck at that morning, and I saw him raise that flag twice. In fact, I had a small picture.
Yeah.
I was telling Al, I had this small picture that I carried with me for years and years in my album.
What, of Mount Siribaki?
And then because that picture, they claim it was done in Frisco or someplace, but that picture was taken aboard my ship because I got it from one of the photographers in the photography department.
Wow.
And
amazing.
So I got on the ham radio here in the 70s. And at that time, I didn't think much of anything. We never talked about any of this stuff until I got on the honor flight here back in 2013.
Really?
And so I carried that picture. And we got talking about it with some of the ham radio operators that I've worked with.
Yeah.
And this fellow from Georgia asked me if I'd send it to him. And in those days, we never talked about copies. So I sent it to him. He never sent it back. I wrote to him later. I wrote to him years later, and he said he didn't remember I sent that to him.
But just to go back to the beginning of the invasion of Iwo Jima, it was a hell of a bombardment, wasn't it, that the American Navy gave them? And presumably you've got aircraft coming over, and this is your first sight of action, isn't it, of war, really?
Yeah, it was funny because the sea was really, it was rough. I used to watch these small boats going in with these fellows, and I said, I feel sorry for you guys. Some of you are going to make it, some of you aren't.
Yeah.
And so it was terrible because they didn't have enough of hospital ships or places to put these wounded guys. So they would bring them aboard our ship because we had a real nice sick bay. And we had some good doctors aboard. And I remember seeing some of these guys coming back. One of them, his face was half shot out.
Jesus.
And one night I even saw him take two of them and slide them overboard. They died on the ship because they had no place to put them. So this is what it was like, and it's very emotional sometimes.
Yeah, I bet.
Just thinking about it.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, but I mean, the scale of the bombardment must have been. I mean, with the sound must have been absolutely deafening, wasn't it?
Not only that, I used to stay up at night sometimes when I didn't have duty, and I'd see these 16 inchers going over from these battleships.
Wow.
And you could see, all you could see was a red ball going in through the sky.
Really?
And then it would hit on the when it hit on the shore, it would just make a big explosion.
Yeah.
So we stayed there until they secured the island, and then we left. We also had the Secretary of Navy aboard at times. So we had a lot of brass aboard our ship, and we were well protected.
Sure.
We always had battleships around us and all. So we were well protected.
Mr. Persichitti, was it just good fortune that you ended up on the El Dorado?
What's that?
Was it just good fortune that you ended up on the El Dorado? Was that just chance, or was there a reason why you ended up on the command ship? Was it? I mean, if you're on the command ship, that must be because you're pretty good at your job.
No, I asked for it, and they gave it to me. When I was in Norfolk, Virginia, they asked me, "What do you want? Where do you want to go?"
Yeah.
And I said to them, I said, "I'd like to." They said, "What ship do you want to go on?" And so they gave me a list of these ships. And when I saw this El Dorado was going to be done in August, and this was like in April when they let me go out of Norfolk. So I ended up at Brooklyn Navy Yard,
right,
waiting for the El Dorado.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so then I ended up in Newport, Rhode Island.
Got you.
They sent me up there for amphibious training. So we had to go up there and fire guns and everything else.
Right.
A lot of marching, whatever.
Yeah.
And we didn't do any of that anyway. But that was part of the amphibious training.
Right.
Because these were the amphibious. We were in the amphibious forces.
Sure. So Iwo Jima takes 5 weeks to completely suppress, to completely win there. And so by that stage, it's kind of near the end of March 1945, isn't it?
After, like I said, after they secured the island, we left. We went back to, I think we went to the Philippines.
Oh, right.
Late. We got ready for Okinawa. And so when we went into Okinawa, it was Easter Sunday morning.
That's right.
It was beautiful morning. It was cold, but beautiful sunshine and all. And what they had done, they had made a mock invasion down out near Naha prior to that. And they sent a lot of the Japs down there. The area where we went into, they went in with hardly any opposition for the first day or so.
Right.
Until the Japs found out where we were. And we had a pretty good secure on the island by that time, to where the Army went south and the Navy, Marines went north.
Right.
And then they started hitting the opposition in the areas where they had their bunkers. But they had a good hold on the island, and they found out that a lot of these people were told that once we went in there, we were going to kill them. That wasn't true.
No.
And then these finally found out the truth. The mostly farmers in that area, and in fact, I even have a communique that I picked up from one of the journalists that wrote. One day, there were two people dressed. They come out with their hands up, and then they had hand grenades, but they were shot. And then there were two others that come out, and they were both dressed in the Army, Japanese, and they come out with their hands up, and one of them was a woman, one was a man, and they wanted to get married. And so they had this Mormon chaplain, I guess. He married them.
No.
And they took him prisoner, and that's what they wanted.
How amazing.
How amazing. So there's many stories.
Because Okinawa was the time of the kamikaze, wasn't it? I mean,
we had our problems there for the 30 days that we were in Okinawa. We were under alert every night, and they had to shut off the engines, and they made smoke from fuel oil, and it was made so that they had like a fog,
right,
to cover the ships. And so that stuff would come into the compartments, and it was really bad sleeping.
Oh, I bet.
You had the smell of the soil, and so that wasn't very pleasant. And then one night we had these two kamikazes coming in.
Really?
They come right at us, and our ship knocked one of them down with their 5-inch gun, I guess.
Really?
And
where were you at this time? Were you at your radio station, or were you watching?
My at that time when you're not on duty, you have a station to so my station was at one of the fire hoses, and one of the passageways. You had to stand on your duty,
right?
Whether you were hit or not. So if you were hit, that you wouldn't be. I wouldn't be here. But anyway, the other one flew right over us and hit the battleship New Mexico. He had 150 casualties.
Goodness.
He hit a midship.
Wow.
Because next morning when I got up and looked over there in the long glass, it was a mess. Good thing it was above the water line, so it wasn't too bad as far as getting the ship back into shape. Although it messed up a lot of guys.
And while you're on board during this battle, I mean, are you getting a sense of what's going on the island itself?
We would just get the through code. Most of our information come from the islands was from journalists,
right?
Because we had a lot of these guys on there. In fact, I got a bunch of these communiques,
right?
That I picked up. I don't know where I got them,
right?
But anyway, maybe because of the job I was doing with the officer, I might have picked these up. I'm not sure, but anyway. I have all these communiques, and I'll tell you, some of them are really something.
I bet.
To listen to some of these guys, and they went through that. Just the service guys on the island.
Yeah.
And a lot of them never made it. Like Ernie Pyle.
Yeah.
He was aboard there for a while.
Oh, was he? What did you get to meet him?
No, I didn't. But I know he was there.
Huh.
And he went ashore. To Iwo Jima, and that's where he got killed.
Yeah, that was
he was one of those journalists that was over there. So there were many of them. In fact, one of them, I can't remember his name now, but he became a broadcaster and after the war. After Iwo Jima, we went to the Philippines. We went to Manila.
Yeah.
And when we got into Manila, my God, we were lucky to get into the harbor because there were so many sunken ships.
Really? How extraordinary.
Yeah, it was terrible. I'll tell you, there wasn't a building. I think there was only one building standing that wasn't hit. It was this one Catholic church over in Manila.
How amazing.
The city was devastated.
Yeah.
Unbelievable what they did to those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went ashore quite a bit over in the Philippines because we were waiting for the big one.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it didn't happen.
Yeah. So you were getting ready to invade the main Japanese islands.
We were all anchored and getting ready to go up to Japan.
Yeah. Amazing. So where were you when the war ended?
We were in Manila.
You were still there. And can you remember the atomic bombs being dropped?
False alarm one night.
Right.
Yeah, they had all ships were lights going and everything, and then they told us it was a false alarm. Evidently, it was when they were probably going up to get ready, and then when they did let us know, it was really something that we had everybody was happy.
So how long did you stay in the Navy after the war?
Well, after that, they told us, because I had enough points to get out at that time because I was helping support a couple of my sisters at that time. My parents had died. My dad died in 1941.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Just before the war, and my mother died in 1944.
Gosh, well, she must have still been pretty young then, wasn't she?
Yeah, I was only 22, 23.
And how old was your mother at the time?
My mother was only 45. My dad was 59 when he died.
Gosh.
He had Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, did he? That's awful.
Yeah,
Wow.
he only at that time they didn't even know what they knew what it was. It was arterial lateral cirrhosis.
That's the one, yeah.
So that was before they even knew Lou Gehrig's disease, because when
Yeah.
Lou Gehrig died, we were in that. So he had
But what happened to your mother?
was
I mean, she was very young.
well, she had a bursted bowel. In those days, they didn't have the medications to take care of it like they do today. It's just like everything else. Like today,
Yeah.
you take your heart out and give you new hearts and whatever.
Yeah, it was a tougher time then, wasn't it?
It was a tough growing up,
Yeah.
and because when I came out of the service, I come home to an empty home, really, because my
Oh, yeah.
sisters. I had one sister, the oldest one that took care of the two young ones. She was getting ready for her boyfriend to come home. They were going to get married and go to Cleveland. And I said, "What am I going to do here? I don't want to be." I didn't like it down there anyway because there was nothing there for me.
Sure.
And so I didn't have any money
Mm-hmm.
outside of what I got my muster and out pay, and then I had I wrecked the family car that we had,
Mm-hmm.
picking up my sister's husband or boyfriend at that time. And the family, my brother, the one brother that was at home, worked in the coal mines, and he was exempt from the service. So he let the insurance expire. And so I didn't have anything to fix the car with. I had to pay the guy that I ran into. And so that took up pretty much all my money I had.
Wow.
And so all I drew was like the 20, they call it 5220. You could draw 52 weeks of unemployment for $20 a week at that time. And at that time, it was a lot of money. But anyway, I said, no, I'm going to. So my brother, I have my oldest brother living up here in New York, in Rochester. He says, come up here and get a job. So I always wanted to be a carpenter, and that's what I ended up doing. I enjoyed it for years.
Good.
And so I decided to teach. So I taught in the vocational schools for 16 years.
How amazing.
And I couldn't get the administration to do what I wanted to do with the program. So I says, well, I think it's time for me to just quit, retire, and go and help people. And that's what I did after that. I took my retirement when I was 59 years old, and I'm still drawing my retirement from the school.
That's amazing.
And right now I don't do anything with my hands much outside of little odds and ends here in the house, and that's about it.
Well, Mr. Persichitti, thank you so much for that. Thank you for giving me so much of your time, and that was just fascinating. It's just so amazing. I think still, after all these years since the end of World War II, to kind of hear those eyewitness testimonies, it really is. It's a great privilege. So thank you very much for your time, especially doing this all the way from, on Zoom all the way over from the other side of the Atlantic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for listening. There are episodes about the United States in World War II all this Thanksgiving week on We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Cheerio.